At a time when MPs are concerned for their safety, there's been a lot of focus in Parliament this week about the language that our politicians are using. In particular, of course, number 10 and also the Prime Minister talking about the Surrender Act, talking about humiliation, saying we will not betray the people. Are you worried about some of that language? And do you think that, in the words of Amber Rudd, it's inciting violence?
I am worried about the use of language at the moment. It is incredibly divisive. It is designed to stoke resentment, to provoke anger, to nurse grievances, and it is feeding into a toxic atmosphere, not just in Parliament, but I think more widely. I think we have to recognise that people can take different views on the issue of Brexit, but hold those views in good faith. And I think this applies to all sides, because I think there's, one side has had a tendency to sneer, the other side has had a tendency to denigrate and accuse people of being unpatriotic. We've got to recognise that people of good faith and intelligence can hold different views on this matter, and that ultimately, as a country, we've got to come back together again at some point.
We heard from Matt Hancock earlier, the Health Secretary, who was defending the use of the word the Surrender Act. He said it actually is, an accurate way of describing what the Benn Act seeks to do. When it is, of course, when we talk about these things, just for the viewers, it's the idea that MPs voted to compel the Prime Minister to seek an extension rather than leave with no deal if he can't get a deal with the EU. Now, there's a story in the Mail on Sunday today saying that people involved in the drafting of that act got help from Brussels. You were very close to what happened with that act. Is that true?
No, it's not true. And I think here is a very good example of a number 10 briefing using the word collusion. I mean, that's a very loaded word in itself, collusion, providing no evidence that there was anything supporting this statement, that there was help with the drafting coming from foreign countries. It's not true, but even if it were true, the use of language of that sort is completely disproportionate, completely over the top, and feeds into this narrative that anyone who doesn't agree with number 10's position is somehow unpatriotic or betraying the country or an enemy or wanting the country to surrender. I mean, this is the sort of language that I think a lot of people are concerned about, because it is questioning motives of people who are just trying to do the best for this country and avoid what most people, I think, who've studied this closely would accept would be a disastrous outcome of us leaving without a deal on the 31st of October, causing great damage to our prosperity and the integrity of the United Kingdom.
Is it right that there are plans to try and look at a second piece of legislation that would effectively allow the Speaker to bypass the Prime Minister to request an extension if necessary?
Well, I don't want to get drawn into specific ideas, but what I would say is that the Benn Act is effective, it does what it intends to do, and it should be abided by. And I very much hope that the government will be clear that they will abide by the law. And, there are lots of suggestions of loopholes and so on. As far as I can see, anything that's been suggested so far can be easily dealt with. And if necessary, the courts will ensure that the will of Parliament and the law is complied with.
It's interesting you say that. I mean, what do you think the consequences would be if Downing Street, if the Prime Minister did try to ignore the Benn Act?
Well, in truth, if there's an attempt to not follow the law, then the law will take its course, and it'll be a question of going to the courts, and the court will ensure that the law is complied with. But we are a country that is governed by laws. That is our history, that is our tradition. It's one of the most important things about the United Kingdom. And the Prime Minister, to be fair, has been clear that he's going to abide by the law. But to suggest otherwise, these sort of hints that, somehow we're not going to do that, I think is dangerous. It undermines the rule of law in this country, and that's not the role of government to do, far from it.